The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture and Rural Development and Natural Resources will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Borton.
Here.
Representative Mueller. Here. Representative Green. Present. Representative Roth. Here. Representative DeSena.
Still here.
Representative O'Neill. Representative McKinney.
Still here as well.
Mr. Chair, a quorum of subcommittee members are present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Rep. Roth moves to approve the minutes from the April 23rd, 25 meeting. Hearing no objections, those meeting minutes are approved. Today we're going to be hearing from Director Scott Bowen from the DNR on their funding priorities for fiscal 2025-26. And Director, like I mentioned, I have to apologize. We have a shortened meeting today. Not only was the last meeting running late, but I've got to testify. So we're going to, by 11:30, I have to be out of here. So I've invited you to come back. I've asked my members to hold off on questions that aren't exactly, pinpointed to what you're talking about today in the budget. So with that, Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Borton, Minority Vice Chair O'Neill, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you to discuss the Department of Natural Resources fiscal year 2026 executive budget summary. Before we jump into particulars, I want to make a few introductory remarks. I would like to suggest to the committee that we need to have a real conversation about conservation funding. Here in Michigan, the problems are real and urgent. Hunting and fishing license revenue is challenged as the number of people that hunt and fish declines. That's a national trend. Our department hasn't seen an increase in license fees since 2014. In the meantime, everything costs at least 30% more than it did 11 years ago. In some cases, costs have gone up dramatically. Fish food at our hatcheries, for instance, is 71% more expensive than in the last several years. Our salary costs, which we do not control because they are negotiated outside the department and approved by the legislature, have risen 34% since 2014. And the ice storm that just hit northern Michigan, affecting nearly a fourth of Michigan's vast state forest holdings, has put another significant strain on our budget. In 1996, when the DNR was first created as a department separate from then the Department of Environmental Quality, nearly a quarter of the DNR's budget was supplied by general tax dollars. This spoke to broad public support for our work and recognized that we have a part in caring for our natural resources. In the last budget year, general fund dollars were only 14% of our total. A portion of that ongoing funding rightfully goes to our law enforcement division because of their role in general law enforcement in the state. To use another more dramatic example, in 1970, 68% of our parks budget came from the general fund. Today, only 3% is general fund. The DNR gets a total of about 0.5% of the state's general fund against other state needs. I understand there are urgent needs everywhere in government. That said, a budget is a statement of values. You pay for what you care about. As one example, Western Michigan University, I know they just got a championship in hockey, so they serve about 20,000 students a year and receive $88 million in state general fund tax dollars. The DNR this fiscal year received a total of $76 million in general tax dollars. We serve 36 million people who visit our state parks annually. We oversee the largest portfolio and the best portfolio of freshwater fishing in the world. And we manage the largest state-managed public land holding anywhere in the lower 48 states. I take nothing away from Western Michigan or any university in our state where higher education is critical. but I ask again, what do we value as a people? This is our system. We pay to play, which means we have to pay for the work, the tree planting, the habitat improvement, the stewarding of the $1 billion in assets in our state parks, the fish creels, the wildlife surveys. Right now, we are an agency that lives from increase to increase with little ability to do sensible long-term planning, 20, 50-year planning that these assets deserve. At the same time, the number of hunters in particular is steadily declining nationally and in Michigan. The trend lines are obvious. They are not encouraging. We do not get here overnight. We won't get out of it overnight. So we need to have a serious conversation in Michigan about how we take care of what we most identify in our state, our Great Lakes, our beautiful forests, our picturesque trails. Placing a fly perfectly and watching a trout rise to meet it, waiting for a buck on a cold morning opening day, watching a sunset on Lake Michigan or a sunrise on Lake Huron, seeing a state forest bloom with the full range of fall colors, pondering the beauty of the Lake of the Clouds, or visiting in a historic park like Belle Isle. Do we value these things? Do we care about them? How will we care for them then to make sure our children and grandchildren can experience them like we have? And with that, I'd like to invite our Finance and Operations Chief, Dan Lord, to run through the particulars of our budget request.
Thank you, Director. Committee members, appreciate the opportunity to be here. The DNR's portion of the executive budget is focused on an investment in our natural resources that contributes significantly to the state's economy. This investment will support the hunting, fishing, boating, and tourism industries by providing critical revenue to the state for infrastructure, preventative maintenance, and natural resource-based programs. In Michigan, through tourism, recreation, and nature-based economies, the outdoors are big business. Our Great Lakes, inland lakes, forests, and parks attract millions of tourists every year. In 2024, as the Director mentioned, we hosted over 36 million visitors to our state parks. That's an increase of 9 million people in just 4 years. Nationally, Michigan ranks high in outdoor recreation participation categories. We're 7th in the nation with 1.1 million anglers. We're also 7th in the nation with 650,000 hunters. And even with the shortened boating season, we have 815,000 registered watercraft, making us 2nd in the nation. Activities like fishing, hunting, boating, hiking, and camping, they boost economies and tourisms, such as outdoor equipment industries, benefiting economic and related job sectors and local businesses. A lot of Michigan's northern or rural communities, places like Gaylord, Alpena, Munising, and Cadillac, rely on fishing, camping, trail riding, hunting, and other outdoor pursuits to draw visitors that help power their local economies as well. In addition to recreation-based industries, there are economic drivers and job sectors that relate directly to the state's natural resources that the department manages with input directly from industry stakeholders. Due to its rich geology, the state of Michigan has abundant and diverse mineral resources such as oil, gas, copper, salt, sand, and gravel. More than 6.4 million acres of state-owned mineral rights is managed by the department. Through direct leasing and competitive auctions, we work to assure that there are business opportunities while also employing conservative management practices. Currently, there are about 12,000 active oil and gas wells in the state producing a revenue stream that supports the State Park Endowment Fund. Finally, Michigan's 20 million acres of forest, 3.9 million acres that are managed by the department, are a source of sustainable timber production, contributing to construction materials, furniture manufacturing, and paper industries. It takes a lot of land and infrastructure to support all these activities and economic benefits, and the DNR is tasked with the responsibility for managing our natural and cultural resources on behalf of everyone in the state. We have the most state-managed public land in the lower 48 states, as the Director mentioned, and the department's management of this land and associated natural resources sustains hunting, fishing, trail use, and a variety of other recreational activities while also directly supporting the economic and job sectors that I highlighted on the previous slides. We're truly fortunate to call Michigan home, as the Great Lakes represent 20% of the world's freshwater, which provides some of the best fishing opportunities anywhere in the world. Michigan's waters are home to a wide variety of fish, including trout, salmon, walleye, bass, perch, and pike. This variety of species caters to all types of anglers, from beginners to seasoned professionals, and also supports charter fishing businesses. With 11,000 inland lakes and countless miles of rivers and streams, not to mention 365 days of opportunities, Michigan is a haven for people who love to fish and get outdoors. I mentioned earlier the 36 million annual visitors to our state parks. That number rose 32% during the pandemic, and we continue to see growth year after year. That expanded use and increased pressure requires significant maintenance to keep things clean, safe, and functioning for our visitors. Each of the 103 state parks, soon to be 104 with Flint State Park coming online, it's like a small city. We have our own electrical systems, wastewater systems, roads, bridges, parking lots, everything that's on us to maintain and replace. Within state parks and visitor centers, we also showcase our state's history and tell Michigan stories with museums and historic sites like Fayette State Park, Fort Wilkins State Park, and Walker Tavern Historical Site. The Michigan History Center is part of the department and is also responsible for archaeological findings on state lands. The DNR's budget consists of a variety of funding sources, the majority of which, 68%, is restricted funding, revenue from hunting and fishing license sales, camping, participation in the recreation passport, timber sales, and mineral leases. These revenue sources are deposited in over 40 different restricted funds that only can be used for specific purposes as outlined in statute. Restricted funding is typically not interchangeable. As an example, the Park Improvement Fund, which is derived from recreation passport sales and camping revenue, can only be used to support state park and recreation area operations, maintenance, and infrastructure improvements. These park funds cannot be used to support fish and wildlife management when there are declines in hunting and fishing license revenues. 17% of the DNR's budget is from a mix of federal funds, a majority of which are excise taxes on hunting and fishing equipment, and requires that we provide a match from our state hunting and fishing license sales to pull those federal funds down. An increase in hunting and fishing revenue would mean that we could potentially access additional funding for conservation, safety programs, as well as the management of non-game species. The chart also depicts 14% of our budget is from the general fund. Even though everyone in Michigan benefits from healthy natural resources, access to public lands, and the local economic drivers from recreational opportunities, less than 1% of the state's tax base is aligned with the department. The only other department, that being the Department of Insurance, Finance, and Financial Services, was the only area of the state budget that received less general fund than the DNR in the current fiscal year. The first proposal I'd like to highlight is the Recreation Passport opt-out and resident military exemption. The DNR received $273 million from ARPA funding through one-time appropriations to assist with reducing the backlog of infrastructure needs in our state parks and designated trails. Due to bid results and increases in overall construction costs the last 3 years, that funding has not gone as far as we would have hoped. Identified capital improvement needs remain in excess of $250 million for hundreds of state park and trail projects. Additional revenue through the opt-out would increase funding that would help capital improvements and operations with the state park system. As the director pointed out, historically, the state park system has been funded in different ways. Back in 1970, state parks received 68% of their funding from the general fund. Now, on average, it's about 3%, which is primarily one-time funding for capital improvements. Recreation passport participation is currently around 38% under the opt-in model. At a 60% participation rate, we estimate about $21.3 million in additional revenue. However, this would be partially offset by an estimated $4.1 million loss of annual revenue from exempting resident veterans from the recreation passport requirements. 15 years ago, when the recreation passport was conceptualized, it was based on an opt-out model from Montana, which had close to 70% participation rate. Original revenue projections that we analyzed were based on that opt-out model, but it was implemented as the opt-in model, and we've been chasing that participation rate and funding ever since. In 2010, the motor vehicle permit, which was the previous entrance fee, cost $24. The Recreation Passport, which started at $10, has adjusted with inflation, is currently $14. The additional $17.2 million in revenue would be distributed as outlined by the categories on the slide as the formula is articulated within statute. It's important to note that with a 60% participation rate, grants to local communities through the Recreation Passport grant program would nearly double. Currently, that program provides about $2 million annually, and under an opt-out model and that 60% participation rate, we estimate an additional $1.7 million would be going out to those local grant awards. The next proposal I'd like to highlight is the updating of hunting and fishing license and watercraft registration. It's been more than a decade since hunting and fishing licenses have been adjusted, and just like everyone else, we've been impacted by inflation. Operational costs have escalated for fish and wildlife management, infrastructure repairs, maintenance projects, technology support, and law enforcement. The financial strain is further compounded by the decreasing numbers of hunters and anglers, a trend not unique to Michigan. And with reduced participation and the real value of our revenues currently diminishing, urgent attention is needed to address the implications of inflation and secure sustained support for the conservation and management of Michigan's precious natural resources. This chart is just an example of how inflation has impacted standard and ongoing maintenance costs within our wildlife division, and how those costs of annual services have increased since 2014 and are projected to continue to rise. A few additional examples I'd like to mention are our 6 hatcheries rely on liquid oxygen to maintain life support in fish rearing units, as well as when they're transported for stocking. Cost of liquid oxygen has increased by 32% from 2013 to 2023. The cost for a refurbished chassis for a fish stocking truck has increased by 195% from $30,000 in 2014 to $87,000 in 2023. As well, our law enforcement trucks have also increased from $32,000 with a government discount in 2014 to $52,000 with no government discount in 2023. Every year, we've reduced operations to live within the available revenue. As a result, critical maintenance of facilities and equipment has been deferred, which increases cost and repairs down the road or creates emergency repairs, which I'll highlight in the next slide. Supplies and materials, items like fuel, gravel, seed, herbicide, fertilizer, equipment rentals, all of which are used for our maintenance projects and land management activities, have all been reduced. Contracted services like crop planting and grassland mowing and maintenance for dikes, dams, buildings, parking lots have all been cut. Vacant positions remain unfilled. Fewer seasonal staff can be hired, so fewer lake and stream surveys are being completed. Creel clerks have not been hired this year on inland lakes, resulting in less confidence in our harvest estimates. Fewer fish are being reared for stocking across the state. Reduction in emergency responses to sick or nuisance wildlife, like the nuisance bear that's being removed from the backyard of a Gaylord resident, shown on the bottom photo there. We've also reduced health monitoring for fish and wildlife species. We're hiring less seasonal staff this year to clean and maintain facilities, and technology enhancements and new business tools are continuing to be deferred. As I mentioned earlier, one of the ways that we've dealt with revenue constraints is by deferring maintenance and replacement of existing equipment, facilities, and infrastructure. The DNR has more infrastructure assets than any other agency in terms of types and quantities. Fisheries Division alone estimates the value of their assets that they're responsible for are more than $350 million, and our current list of deferred infrastructure projects between Wildlife and Fisheries Division is estimated at $140 million and does not include dams. Each photo on this slide has a story. The photo on the left is of a 1970s tractor that wildlife staff are using for land management and habitat work. It's a solid reflection of the division putting in the maintenance to keep it running, but we're also running on borrowed time. The middle photo is from Black River Dam, which failed last year in the western Upper Peninsula. The original dam was built in 1931, rebuilt in 1966, repaired in 2005, and a dam safety inspection in 2022 indicated that the stop logs needed to be replaced. We put out a bid package in 2023 for the permitting and replacement of those logs. We received no bids. The lower stop logs failed in June of 2024, and the 110-acre impoundment drained over a 7-day period. Estimated renovation and restoration costs are around $3 million, plus the cost to mitigate for a new newly formed 35 acres of wetland is also estimated at $2.8 million. The last picture on the right is of a generator failure at Wolf Lake State Fish Hatchery that occurred during a scheduled power outage. The generator was 50 years old and was started on fire during that planned power outage. We're currently paying $85,000 to rent a generator while we wait 52 weeks of lead time for a new one to be fabricated and installed. There are multiple generators of the same age at 4 of our 6 fish hatcheries. Previous slides focused on areas of our department that depend on revenue from hunting and fishing license sales. Another area of need is within our Parks and Recreation Division that support and maintain the 19 state harbors and nearly 1,100 boating access sites that they are responsible for managing. Watercraft registration fees have not been adjusted since 1993. Failing to keep pace with inflation while also seeing the increased popularity and changes with pontoon boats and paddle sports, this lack of an updated revenue stream means we haven't had the resources to properly maintain and support this infrastructure. Currently, we estimate our needs of state harbors and boating access sites to be around 140 projects at an estimated cost of nearly $100 million. Right-sizing the cost of watercraft registration would provide an additional $3.5 million to the Waterways Fund, about $2.5 million of which would go to Parks and Recreation Division, and $1 million of additional funding would go out to our Waterways Grant Program for local grant and aid facilities. The watercraft registration increase would also add $3.4 million to the Marine Safety Fund, utilized by our Law Enforcement Division, as well as doubling grant funding to county sheriff departments. The next proposal is for one-time general fund investment of $15 million specifically for dams. While there are over 2,500 dams in the state, regardless of ownership, the DNR has inherited and manages on behalf of the state an aging inventory of over 200 dams with an average age of 62 years. A subset of DNR-managed dams require comprehensive and immediate action with mounting regulatory complexities and escalating cost. Construction estimates can range widely depending on the size and scale. It can cost $2 million to remove a dam. Ongoing can cost even more. Not maintaining and removing dams can have consequences like damage to surrounding and downstream buildings and infrastructure, as well as environmental impacts to natural resource communities which require costly cleanup and restoration responses. The Black River Dam that I mentioned a few slides ago was the example that we started with when we began drafting this presentation. Since then, there's been a partial failure of a portion of the earthen embankment dam at one of the 13 rearing ponds at the Wolf Lake Hatchery in Van Buren County. The DNR has experienced 8 dam failures across the state since 2022. Finally, a few supplemental requests for the current fiscal year I'd like to mention. Thank you, Chair Borton, for your introduction of House Bill 4392 earlier this morning and the $41.8 million for local and state grants funded by the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. We're also seeking a $6.5 million supplemental that would utilize one-time investment revenue that's available from strong investment returns the past 2 years with the Game and Fish Protection Trust Fund. As we've presented today with the range of infrastructure and maintenance needs that we have, we know that addressing some of those critical items today will prevent higher and emergency costs in future years. We're also seeking additional federal spending authority to support removal of culverts and to restore the connectivity in streams that were known to historically been home to the Arctic grayling as that species is being reintroduced. Additional federal spending authority would support the high-speed internet infrastructure easement activities the department is responsible for overseeing. And finally, we're seeking a general fund support for the remaining portion of a commercial fishing license buyout that was part of the Great Lakes Fishing Decree. With that, appreciate your time.
Absolutely, thank you. You both covered a lot of information in a short amount of time, and I appreciate that. We'll go to questions from the members. We'll start with Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for the whole department for the work that you do. You have a huge responsibility, and as well, the state really benefits. I'm looking at major boilerplate changes from fiscal year 24-25. This is my 7th year working on budgets. Each of us legislators represent around 90,000 people. These people have different jobs, backgrounds, et cetera. In fact, I grew up with some of your employees, just growing up. Why is it that in the boilerplate change, section, let me think here, major boilerplate, section 207, why is it the executive branch has chosen to limit transparency in the government and to limit its employees' representation by removing section 207 from the boilerplate? That boilerplate is there because there is a need for it. Apparently, some state employees spoke with their legislator and got disciplined. Therefore, the legislature saw fit to enshrine whistleblower status to those state employees. So 2 questions. Why does the legislature feel the need to enshrine the whistleblower status? And number 2, why does the director of the DNR and other directors across the budget consistently remove that provision for its employees?
Honestly, I'm not familiar with that reference. So is anybody among us? Jason? Have you an idea?
Hello, Jason Crandall, Budget Officer for the DNR. So to the question on section 207, yeah, that was essentially a EOG decision in terms of striking that from the boilerplate. But what it goes down to is there is no provision that prevents anyone from approaching a legislator or, in terms of that. So again, I think it was deemed a necessary boilerplate in that regard. But I can't speak to the broader state implications. It was a statewide decision.
And I can say that my work in the DHHS and many other budgets, that as I have state employees come talk to me, they ask me, you're not going to tell anybody I'm talking to you because I'm scared that I'm going to get disciplined on that. There's a reason why this boilerplate is in there, because there is a fear by some of our employees from talking to the legislature. I'm not a big union guy, but sometimes I understand why we have union protections for our employees, because we don't always deal with them correctly. So, thank you.
All right, very good. We will move on to Rep. McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for your presentation. Just want to highlight Rep. Green for a quick moment. I do agree with that. I've had countless constituents who work for the state of Michigan come to me under confidence. So what he's saying is there's a lot of truth to that. But just got a quick question about the presentation, especially towards the end around federal high-speed internet infrastructure funding. Which DNR lands would that high-speed internet infrastructure be installed?
Specifically, that funding is a grant by way of LEO. It enables us to review all the applications and requests that come to the department crossing various lands. A lot of that is Upper Peninsula, Northern Lower Peninsula, but it's driven by the industry. Those are the requests that come to us, and that's how we review and entertain those.
Got it. And then are those, obviously we're in a world of cuts as we speak, and I ask a question about this every single committee. But what is the funding? Is the funding at risk, and what is the situation of that? Was there any pauses? Just want to hear from you guys what's going on.
My recollection is it fell under BIIL funding at the federal level. And again, those funds came directly to the MyHigh office within LEO. And then we in turn were issued an MOA and a grant to support our activities for those funds to come through. So I know there's been some back and forth, but the supplemental allows us to leverage that grant and MOA from them to continue to do our work, process those as quickly as they come in.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll go to Rep. Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. And thank you guys for coming forward. When's the last time the boating fees have been increased? Can you give me the year?
It was 93.
Yeah, and I can tell you part of the problem. I'm in the industry. It wasn't even necessarily the state's registration fees. It was the Coast Guard user fees. It was the luxury tax. All that were in that same time frame, which it devastated the boating community for a couple of years. So I think it's worth looking at. certainly. I'm in that field, so I'd be happy to have conversations with you guys on that. But we got to make sure there's no other fees coming down from the federal. I don't think we see that, but that was a major time in 92, 93 that almost, I don't want to say wiped out the industry, but it was a major detriment to the boating industry at that time. So the other one I say is, have you guys been talking to Eagle about dredging? Because water levels are way low. I have not seen this low of levels since probably somewhere around 90. And I'm understanding there's some difficulties with Eagle with PFAS PFAS considerations in some of our dredging. This is going to be a real problem with this large of an industry if we can't dredge. And that I would recommend the director have conversations, the Eagle director, that we make sure we're able to do this, because you could see some major harbors really have a detrimental effect if we can't dredge. So just a suggestion, have those conversations, get back to us, tell us what Eagle's doing. But I want to put it on the radar that this is a huge situation.
Understood, Representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, Rep. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Director, and team. Thank you for just a very clarifying presentation. The hunting and fishing license issue, as you know, I was one of the bill sponsors for the last one, and I will gladly report that there's some good, robust conversations going on a bipartisan fashion on that topic. So just wait and see on that. But again, you made a comment that's very resounding. You pay for what you care for. And there's no other state like Michigan. I mean, there's no other state like Michigan. And so we have the responsibility for our kids, our great-grandkids, and our great-great-grandkids to take care of this precious commodity that the good Lord has blessed us with, for them to be a part of and experience. And so it's very obviously, and like this morning, we did make a very, very important, Mr. Chair, piece of legislation that does what we're talking about, so thank you for that. But, we really have to, look at how we want to look decades and decades from now. So these decisions we're making today aren't for today, they're for the future. And so I just want to commend your entire team. We all love the great outdoors in various forms and fashion. And it's just an honor to be entrusted with the responsibility to maintain such a beauty. And so, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to just pledge my support for whatever mechanisms we use to elevate our commitment to care for this pristine beauty that we have here in Michigan. So thank you to all of you that are part of the Department of Natural Resources for all the work that you do. You had 63 million people come to Michigan. That's a huge flow of traffic. And when we enhance, as we're going to do, make those enhancements, it's going to increase the potential for folks to visit and see what beauty we have here in Michigan. So with that, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you all for your commitment.
Thank you, Mr. Vice
All
Chair.
right, thank you, Rep. O'Neill. Rep. DeSena.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. I think when we look at anything in a vacuum, it's difficult to say we need more of this, more of that, because unless you look at the whole, and I appreciate what you do, and I know you have limited resources. I'm sure there was a time in Michigan where it didn't cost anything to fish, or it didn't cost anything to put a boat in the water. And I just look at the economics of it, price elasticity, you know that theory. When you raise the price on something, you get less of it. And to me, it's just really a statement, honestly. This is a population and a demographic problem. If we had more people, you would have more business. And if in a declining population or a stagnant population, you're suffering the effects that we're all suffering, all businesses are suffering, which is less people, less business, less commerce. We're all being hit by it. And if you raise the price, I'm reticent to raise the prices on anything. As a government agency, we need to look inward, and I know your department, it would be especially difficult, but I think we need to really look at our priorities and see where we can cut. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, members? None other one? All right, I'd like to echo and maybe expand a little bit on what Rep. Green and Rep. McKinney mentioned earlier about staff and employees being afraid of being disciplined. Now that I'm chair of this board, a number of folks from the DNR, both people that have been there for years and people not so long, professionals, people that are experts in their fields, have come to me as long as they can remain anonymous. And they said, if this ever got back, I would be disciplined to the point where I would probably be fired, but you need to know this information. So we're compiling that. We're taking a look at it. We'll have future discussions about it going forward, but people within the department should not be afraid to talk with us. I mean, you know, we represent our residents, you know, we know what they want. And we need to be able to share that. But for them to fear discipline, being disciplined or being fired, I really have a problem with that. So I'm very grateful for the ones that do come out. I mean, to the point they tell me, Ken, I can't even email you this information because I have to copy my superior in, and they're watching me. They shouldn't have to worry about things like that. So we'll have more conversations about that. And it's probably not just the DNR, it may be other departments, but obviously I'm concerned obviously about the DNR. So we'll look at that going forward. So again, gentlemen, thanks for coming in. I appreciate the abbreviated meeting. I'd love to hear more from you. I'd love to, members to be able to ask more questions. And the director obliged me by saying he'll come back in soon. So we'll get that set up. So thank you. With that, we have no absent members. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.